The world opens with a breath of iron and frost. A torch guttering against the black, its smoke curling like a ghost over cold stone. Beneath the flickering light, a stained canvas stirs, drawn back by fingers trembling with dread. What we see is distant walls, their mortar crumbly as memory, beyond which lies an edict, banishment inked in red, sealed with wax that fractures like an oath broken. They stand beneath this proclamation, soldiers once steeped in discipline and valor, now suspended in dusk's chill, their armor dulled, their standards folded like silent wings. Moss clings to their boots, snowflakes drift into their open hands and melt to grief's residue. Their breaths hang in the air as mist, fragile as hope. In that opening moment, the soul of exile bends into a whisper shared among them. A centurion, cloak weighted with embers, presses a hand into his chest, feeling the heartbeat that still pulses with duty. Women stand nearby, their veils scant against the cold, hands clasped over swollen bellies, the promise of life cupping warmth against bone. They cradle tokens, a rusted key, a lock of hair, a scrap of parchment, the tangible threads of a life unraveling. This is where our chapter begins, at the boundary between law and wilderness, between memory's glow and oblivion's hush. Deep into the camp, the tent flaps sigh against the wind, and a knife glimmers in oil lamp's tremor. Inside, a scribe dips quill into ink as black as starless grief, transcribing names that once meant lineage and land, onto parchment that slithers from memory into exile. Each letter is a dirge, each name a life relegated from hearth and hall into desolation. Outside, the crunch of straw gives way to silence. Lantern light snags on the moss-darkened shields laid upon the ground. Their emblems shadowed, indistinct, a lion's mane dulled, an eagle's talon bent. The very symbols of honor lie abandoned, buried beneath grief and frost. A raven lands nearby, its silhouette sharp against frozen grass, as if surveying the ruin of pride. You hear the distant tolling of a chapel bell, trembling under winter's breath, a single, mournful cadence. Each toll resonates through bodies hollowed by surprise, duty twisted like the fluted columns of their shattered keep. It evokes everything they have lost: home, certainty, the fevered expectation of morning safety. Within the hush, a child's soft sob breaks the stillness. She clings to a spindle carved from bone, a relic of homely hours spent spinning thread by hearth's lull. In her eyes, the thread of routine is fraying, her grief as fine and fragile as spun wool. A mother tilts her chin toward the cloth, her lips parted in a silent prayer. The song of spinning is replaced by silence that shatters like glass. Beyond the camp, the land waits, blanketed in white, its contours hidden in motherhood's embrace. The exiles will walk into that emptiness, each step a sacrifice across the threshold of belonging. Their path runs past burnt-out hearths cooled to memory, past the skeletal remains of barns once fragrant with barley and straw. Among them, sheep eye them with mute accusation, their fleece unmarked by human grief. A soldier tucks a small dagger into his belt, the curved blade etched with rune-like scratches. In his mind, it is both burden and talisman. He remembered how it gleamed at dawn, used in ritual rather than slaughter, at least in better times. Now it reflects cold sky and fear. That blade will carve a survival far from hearth and safety. The wind shifts. It carries the scent of conifer and cold, damp earth, forests waiting to swallow them. It brings the memory of wood smoke and ale, of laughter on stone-flagged marketplaces, of feasts now gone. The wind knows their names. And yet within that sorrow, a thread of instinct flickers. They do not yet know it, but the road ahead will demand what stone halls never required. Courage not born of loyalty to lords, but survival spun from bone and breath. In the hush before dawn, the camp stirs. Lanterns douse, vanishing one by one into darkness. Cloaks whisper as they shift onto shoulders weighted with more than cloth. A horse neighs, an echo of life and fear. The world is reduced to the sound of breath and heartbeat and distant bell. One woman steps forward, her eyes bright in the blackout of night. She lifts a hand, and from one finger slips a ring, carved with her family's crest. She presses it into the child's palm, a silent passing of story. The child does not yet understand, but she will. The presence of loss becomes a seed of resilience. Then, as sleep yields to movement, they begin to march. Boots crush frozen grass, voices swallowed by snow-laden branches. With each footfall, they relinquish histories not yet mourned, stepping instead onto paths unknown. And as their figures vanish into Twilight's hush, the bell tolls once more. A benediction, a lament, a question unanswered. What remains when the world you know has denied you its gates? They move into the emptiness, exile written into footprints that will vanish with spring's thaw, yet imprint the marrow of those who walk. The future waits in that drift of footsteps, in the hush of branches, in the story not yet spoken. The next chapter will begin where memory ends, where frost gives way to dawn, and where survival asks a price no law can measure. The screen remains dark for a heartbeat, and then, faint and chilling, the crack of wooden boots on frosted earth. A candle flare reveals a weary company, mothers holding children whose breath fogs the air, soldiers with eyes glazed by hunger, lips pressed raw from whispered prayers. A thin haze of pine smoke hovers, reminding us that warmth is an illusion tonight. One child clutches a simple wooden figurine, a bird, wings frozen as if mid-escape. In that moment, the wild world outside and the regimented world they've left collide in their palms. This is the first breath of the night they no longer know, a journey against oblivion. They trudge out of the glimmering arc of torches that once lit marbled halls, now silent. Snow cracks beneath their sandals. Silence meets them in that cracking sound, a silence heavy with guilt, with fear, with a kind of mourning that cannot be spoken. Every step echoes the absence of benches warmed by meal and counsel, of wheat stored in granaries, of lullabies that once softened wooden cradles. Lanterns fade behind them, swallowed by the void. Sleep frames daily life as a ritual, both a reprise and a beginning, but for these exiles the notion of rest has splintered. Tonight will not bring restoration. Instead, the world, in its brittle hush, bears witness to broken oaths and vanished homesteads. They follow the silent trail, the sky above faintly glimmering with stars whose light feels distant as hope. Their breath steams in rhythm with their heavy steps as if the air itself laments. The forest embraces them, its branches like gnarled hands in the mist, and the moss beneath their feet feels cold as remorse. In the stillness, ancient roots press into the soles of worn boots. Life in walls has ended. Now life in root and bough begins. A mother pauses, pressing the bird figurine to her lips. The cold wood warms with her breath. She remembers a courtyard song, children spinning thread into rope, laughter rising like steam. That memory burns brighter than any flame here. She doesn't allow herself to cry. Loss is luxuriously forbidden. Instead, she draws the child closer, letting that warmth circle between them in the dark. Somewhere ahead, a monk's bell tolls, not for mercy, but for memory. A mournful echo that slides through fog and tree, demanding folk remember. In those tones rests the restlessness of monks who once rose at midnight to chant and chant, half sleeping, bodies weighed by faith and flesh. They turned their wakefulness into devotion to survive. Maybe these exiles will do the same. Warming their hands on lamps that sputter with frost-cracked glass, the soldiers continue. One kneels by a moss-covered stream. The water flows but doesn't carry away fear. He kneads his fingers into the slick stone, views his reflection warped by running silver. In that blur, he sees a soldier framed by memory, not the man who stands here now. The reflection is deeper than wear, an exile's face reshaped in murk. The stream brings scent, cold water, peat, night's damp breath. He leans closer, sees fish shimmering below, silent witnesses to this flight. Their presence is both a comfort and a reminder. Life persists even when hearths falter. Beyond the thicket awaits a clearing, so open it feels like ocean under moonlight. Snowflakes drift to the ground like pale ashes, and the cold air pricks lumps of wool cloaks. They stop there, a broken procession undone by expanse. In the cold vastness, there are no walls to touch, no torches to push back night, only sky and the hush between. A girl presses her cheek to the snow, feeling its crystalline bite. Her fingers press the wooden figurine against her heart. The world is stripped of warmth, yet in that gesture is the seed of tomorrow. It is in absence that memory finds roots, and in memory, the fragile blossom of endurance. Without warning, the hush gives way. From the darkness, a hush becomes whisper, a faint chant. It threads through air like prayer, carried on wind. The exiles turn, hearts shaking, eyes straining. Perhaps it's memory conjured, not the chant of stolen liturgy, but the echo of the chapel, of voices raised in plea, weary but unbroken. The sound slips away, subdued by fog. Yet in that breath, yes, hope stirred. Each person bows, as if in ritual. The chant was not theirs, but its echo reaches inside. Inhaling cold becomes sacred. They breathe the silence after it, the silence that holds what was beautiful and is lost. They rise, continuing onward. Every movement is prayer, every eye cast forward. No longer bound by law, they walk into their deep memory, into a story stitched by longing, by guilt, by small kindnesses that outlast walls. Finally, they reach the edge of the forest. The trees recede, and beyond lies open land, uneven, obscured by moon shadow. It's both invitation and threat. The child tightens her grip on the figurine. Rosemary smoke from saving pockets drifts from a small bundle, a scent of home carried into wilderness. There, at the forest's rim, they halt. Pale light bathes them in clarity, not warmth, but truth. They are no longer who they thought. Their journey begins here, and from the forest's edge, beyond shadow's hold, comes silence that waits. When morning comes, not with herald, but with quiet gray light, this edge will feel sharper, colder. But dawn will bring the promise of movement beyond memory. The next chapter will open on footsteps in mud, on water boiled over smoky coals, on voices hardened by loss but unbroken in resolve. It begins in that frozen boundary, where the world they were and the world they must become meet and whisper. The torch trembles in the tent, its flame hissing as if reluctant to burn. Smoke curls upward, the bitter scent clinging to wool and metal. A man stands at the center, shoulders heavy with years of battle, hands trembling as they hover over the Legion's standard. Once a symbol of triumph, now it leans bent, its eagle dulled and broken. He touches it as one might touch a dying friend, careful, reverent, afraid of what silence will follow. Beyond the thin canvas walls, the camp stirs with unease, boots scuffing straw, breath held in fearful rhythm. It is not the clash of swords that they dread, but something colder, more final. The king's decree, whispered like a curse through the ranks. The edict had arrived at dusk, carried on parchment sealed in blood-red wax. Its words trembled in the hands of the scribe who read them aloud, his voice quivering like a candle in wind. Exile. Dishonor. The Legion condemned not by defeat on the battlefield, but by command, by the fickle wrath of a crown. Outside, men pressed their palms to their knees, heads bowed not in prayer but in disbelief. Women clutched their children, the smallest fingers curling around beads, cloth dolls, or scraps of bread meant to silence hunger. The very air felt altered, as if the decree itself had stolen its warmth, leaving only the chill of betrayal. Inside the tent, the standard-bearer lingers. His armor creaks as he kneels, not in fealty, but under the unbearable weight of memory. He recalls parades beneath marble arches, laughter spilling into courtyards where grapes and bread were shared with open hands. He recalls banners snapping proudly in spring winds, their gilded threads catching sunlight like rivers of fire. Yet now here, only shadows remain. He bends lower, forehead brushing cold iron, whispering words no one else hears. Perhaps apology, perhaps farewell. The camp whispers with muted unrest. A mother hums a lullaby, the sound thin as smoke, carrying into the night. Her child clings to a small wooden bird, carved crudely yet carried as treasure. Its wings are forever outstretched, frozen in a flight it will never complete. Outside, the forest listens, branches creaking like old bones in the wind. A raven perches on the crooked frame of the gate, its cry sharp, mocking, as though it alone welcomes this downfall. Snow begins to fall, delicate and slow, flecking helmets and cloaks. It settles on the standard too, turning its golden sheen into pale ruin. One soldier reaches up, catching a flake on his finger. It melts instantly, leaving behind only dampness, a fleeting ghost of purity. He cannot help but think of the world they are leaving, the warmth of kitchens, the comfort of bread rising in clay ovens, the smell of rosemary crushed beneath a cook's knife. These things now belong to others. They march instead toward uncertainty, carrying only echoes of what was once theirs. The silence thickens, pressing down like a weight. Even the horses shift uneasily, hooves striking earth in muted protest. The standard-bearer rises at last, lifting the broken eagle into his arms. Its weight is awkward, as though it resists being carried further. He steps outside the tent, the cold air biting at his face, the world hushed in anticipation. All eyes turn toward him. The torchlight flickers across his features, carving hollows of shadow beneath his eyes. He holds the emblem high for all to see, but where once it brought pride, now it stirs only sorrow. No one cheers. No one sings. They stand together in silence, their breath visible in the cold. A child begins to cry, quickly hushed by a mother's hand. The only sound is the groaning of wood as the gates behind them swing shut, chains rattling with the finality of judgment. That sound cuts through the air like a verdict, echoing across frost and stone. A door is closed, a chapter ended. The world of their belonging is gone. The standard bearer does not lower the emblem. He turns, eyes fixed on the mist-shrouded valley beyond. The path is uncertain, lined with hunger, fear, and the weight of rumor. They are cursed, the world whispers. Their exile is not merely distance, but destiny. Still, he does not falter. Behind him, the legion begins to move, step by step, cloaks dragging in snow, torches dimming as the forest swallows them. Above, a single bell tolls from a distant chapel. Its sound carries faint across the wind, both mourning and benediction. The soldiers pause, just for a heartbeat to listen. In that hollow sound lies every memory of faith and every fear of abandonment. Some cross themselves, others look away. The bell fades, leaving silence once more. The standard bearer presses forward, the emblem heavy in his arms. Snow thickens, cloaking the earth in white, covering the footprints they leave behind. Soon no trace will remain of their presence, no mark of where they once stood. Only silence, only absence. And yet, in that silence, something stirs. Not triumph, not defiance, but endurance. They carry more than exile. They carry the memory of who they once were. And though the road before them is dark, it is theirs to walk. The night closes around them, but the torchlight still glows faintly in the mist, flickering like a heartbeat. Ahead lies a forest older than kings, its shadows waiting. What they will find there, salvation, despair, or a fate yet unnamed, remains hidden. But for now, the legion walks, and the emblem, though broken, still rises above them. The chapter ends not with triumph, but with a question, lingering in the frost-bitten air. When all that defined you is stripped away, what remains to hold you together? And with that question, the silence deepens, guiding us toward the next dawn, where the exile's path will grow harsher and the true test of endurance begins. Twilight bleeds across the courtyard, a thin purple veil stretching over stone and shadow. The braziers burn low, their smoke biting with the sharp scent of tallow. Sparks curl upward into the gathering dark, vanishing like prayers too frail to reach the heavens. Women wait beside carts lined with charred wood, their veils shifting in the wind, faces hidden as though shame itself demanded concealment. A child clutches a torn parchment, the king's decree, its wax seal cracked like a wound that cannot close. The words, though silent now, weigh upon them heavier than chainmail, heavier than hunger. A centurion steps through the towering archway, cloak tattered, its edges still singed by the embers of the day's destruction. His boots strike the frozen ground with a hollow echo, as though the earth recoils from bearing his weight. In his hand he carries a small box, carved with vines and leaves, a vessel not of war, but of memory. Inside lies a lock of hair, a slip of parchment, a sprig of dried lavender. Tokens of a life severed, fragments of love carried into the wilderness. He presses the box against his chest and inhales the fading fragrance, as if scent alone might summon the warmth of the world they are abandoning. Around him, servants pack provisions for the exile, wheels of cheese wrapped in waxed cloth, barley loaves already hardening in the evening air, skins of bitter ale. Their hands move without thought, gestures carved by duty rather than will. A priest passes among them, his breath ghosting in the cold, voice low and trembling as he mutters Latin invocations. His fingers drip holy water over bent heads, each droplet as cold as regret, tracing down necks and into wool collars. The legion does not look up. They are not sure whether they believe in blessings anymore. The courtyard stones are carved with echoes of what once was. Footprints worn into the granite by senators in crimson robes, minstrels who once sang as evening feasts unfurled, merchants who traded salt, spices, and silks beneath lantern glow. Tonight those stones feel hollow, emptied of laughter, heavy with loss. The sound of wagon wheels creaking over them is a dirge, a lament for a life that has been stolen in silence rather than in battle. Snow begins to fall, soft as ash. It settles into hair, onto cloaks, upon the tired faces of men who once stood proud in gleaming armor. It drifts upon the women's veils until they appear like specters, half vanished into the twilight. A raven perches on the gargoyle above the gate, its feathers slick with frost, its eyes black as judgment. The bird tilts its head and croaks once, the sound sharp, final, like a nail driven into a coffin. The centurion looks up, and for a moment it seems as though the raven is marking their departure, sealing it in the ledger of eternity. At last the great gates creak, chains rasping against iron as the world they once knew prepares to close them out. The sound is deafening, louder than a battlefield, louder than drums. It is the sound of finality, of doors barred and thresholds denied. A boy presses his cheek against the wood as it shudders shut, and the cold seeps into his skin like truth. On the other side, the torches of their homeland flicker, blurred by tears, until the light is gone and only darkness remains. In that moment, grief becomes ritual. The Legion stands still, silent in the falling snow, as if acknowledging the weight of what has been lost. Some bow their heads, some grip their cloaks tighter, some stare into the nothing ahead, eyes hard and unblinking. The centurion does not move. He holds the box in one hand, and the memory of all that has crumbled in the other. His silence is not surrender, but the gathering of resolve. Then, slowly, the line begins to move. Carts groan, wheels crunching over snow, horses stamp their hooves and snort into the frigid air. Mothers lift their children, pressing kisses to frozen foreheads, murmuring words too soft to hear. A soldier takes the hand of his wife, rough palm against trembling fingers, the brief touch a vow of survival. Step by step, they pass beneath the arch, leaving the courtyard for the wilderness beyond. The braziers sputter behind them, flames shrinking into shadows. The priest lingers at the gate, his hands lifted in benediction, though his eyes are wet with helplessness. Snow thickens, veiling the courtyard, swallowing the final traces of their departure. The raven spreads its wings and vanishes into the sky, its cry trailing like a curse. Beyond the walls, twilight deepens into night. The chapel bell tolls once, slow and heavy, the sound echoing across the valley like the heartbeat of a dying world. The Legion pauses only for a breath, their faces turned upward, listening. The note fades into silence, but the silence feels alive, waiting, filled with the weight of all that has yet to come. The centurion looks back one final time. The gates are shut, the torches extinguished, the walls nothing more than shadow against the dark. He knows he will never return. He turns forward, his breath clouding the air, his steps carrying him into exile. Snow crunches beneath him, muffling the sound of the past, swallowing the remnants of memory. And as the Legion disappears into the forest, twilight gives way to night. Shadows rise like a tide, cloaking them in uncertainty. Yet somewhere in the darkness, a faint light flickers. Torch, star, or hope. It is impossible to say. But it glows, however faintly, promising that the journey is not yet ended, that another chapter waits to be written. The night folds around them, and with it comes the question that will carry us into the next chapter. When the walls fall silent and the gates are barred, will the human spirit still find a way to endure? The night hangs low and heavy, a canopy of silence stretched across stone and sky. Moss grips the walls of the old city, its roots drinking from centuries of tears. The battlements loom above, their teeth of stone jagged against the moon, as though gnawing at the heavens in defiance. At their base, shadows move, cloaks whispering, boots biting frost-hardened earth, the metallic rattle of armor muted as if even steel itself fears to make sound. The air tastes of rust and ash, a mingling of breath and sorrow. The procession slithers through narrow alleys, where cobblestones glisten with damp, slick as oil. The walls on either side seem to lean inward, pressing close, listening. Each alley carries the scent of rot, of damp wood left too long beneath rain, of stale grain left unground in abandoned homes. From windows blackened by soot, a single candle sputters, its flame quivering against the dark like a soul too frail to endure. Rats scurry along the gutters, their claws clicking against stone, their eyes gleaming with a cold recognition. Among the exiles walks a girl, no more than 10 years old. She staggers beneath the weight of a small cask bound in iron hoops, the rope handle biting into her palm. Wine sloshes inside, a relic of a feast that will never come again. Her braid swings against her cloak, tied with a faded ribbon that once caught sunlight in the courtyard of her home. Now, under the moon's pale veil, it looks like a tether to a life already buried. She stumbles, and a soldier reaches out, steadying her with a hand calloused from sword and shield. His eyes linger on her too long, as if seeing in her both a burden and a promise, a reason to move forward. Above them, the city exhales. The groan of wooden beams, the creak of shutters barely holding against wind, the drip of water down stone. Each sound is magnified by silence, by the weight of absence. The alley breathes with them, yet remains indifferent. A dog barks in the distance, its voice sharp, mournful, then swallowed by the dark. They press on until the walls rise before them, ancient, scarred, veined with ivy. At their base stands an iron gate, its hinges swollen with rust. The chains that hold it are old, but they remain strong, their metal hardened by centuries of weather and war. The soldiers stop here. The girl presses her cheek against the cold bars, her skin numbed instantly by frost. Through the gaps she can see the forest stretching beyond, a black ocean of branches and fog. On this side, the city. On the other, Exile. The centurion steps forward, shoulders broad beneath a cloak sodden with melting snow. His hand closes around the gate's handle, its surface rough, corroded, biting into flesh. He pulls, and the hinges shriek, a sound like an old wound torn open again. The screech pierces the night, echoing through the alleys, rattling off stone until it seems the whole city cries out in protest. Behind them, silence answers, broken only by the shuffle of feet, the faint hiss of breath. The gate resists, but it yields. It swings outward slowly, a mouth opening to swallow them whole. The forest waits, vast and merciless, its branches clawing against the night. Snow swirls at its edge, drifting over roots and stones, hiding pitfalls beneath fragile white veils. The wind spills through the opening, raw and biting, carrying with it the scent of pine, damp earth, and something more ancient, the smell of solitude, of lives erased by time. The girl lingers at the threshold, her hand gripping the iron still. Her lips part as though to speak, but no words come. Instead, she closes her eyes and presses her forehead to the cold metal, as if to seal in her memory of this place. Then she turns, clutching her casque, and steps through. One by one, they follow. Boots crunch against snow, wheels grind, horses snort into the dark. The alley gives way to the wild, to a path not carved by stone but by shadow. Behind them, the gate slams shut with a thunderous finality, the chains rattling like laughter from the dead. The sound reverberates through the night, a verdict sealed, an oath broken. For a moment they stand still, listening to the emptiness behind them, listening to the forest's breath ahead. The silence is not absence, it is weight. It presses into their chests, fills their throats, clings to their skin like frost. And yet, within that silence, something stirs. A resolve that grows not from glory or command, but from the refusal to vanish. The girl looks upward. The moon peers through clouds, veiled and pale, its light spilling across her face like a blessing or a curse. The ribbon in her braid glints faintly, the only color in a world gone gray. She tightens her grip on the casque and steps forward, into the embrace of the unknown. The others follow, their figures swallowed by mist, by trees, by the unrelenting shadow. Behind them lies stone and silence. Before them lies hunger, fear, and the test of endurance. Yet in the space between, the gate still echoing with its groan, they carry with them one thing the forest cannot swallow, the memory of who they were. And so they walk into darkness, their breath rising like incense, their footsteps marking a path soon to vanish under snow. The gate fades behind them, just another scar in the stone of a city that has turned its face away. Ahead, the forest deepens, a labyrinth of branches that will soon close like a hand around them. The night holds its breath, waiting to see if exile will break them, or if, in the marrow of loss, they will discover the strength to endure. The path narrows, the trees close in, and the silence of the gate still clings to their backs. It is into this silence that the next chapter will be born. The first sound is the crack of frost beneath boots as they step into the chapel. Dawn has not yet risen, but the world is already pale, ghosted by the faint shimmer of snow beyond the stained glass. The air is thick with incense, resinous and sharp, mingling with the bitter bite of cold that seeps through the stone walls. Every breath blooms white in the gloom, curling upward toward rafters lost in shadow. Candles sputter on the altar, their flames fighting against drafts that sneak through cracked mortar. The light fractures against colored panes, spilling bruised reds and fractured blues across bowed heads. They kneel together, not in triumph but in surrender, their knees pressed to stone so cold it gnaws through cloth and flesh alike. The priest stands before them, robe threadbare, his lips trembling as he murmurs prayers in a tongue both sacred and broken. His voice wavers like a reed in the wind, carried more by duty than belief. Each syllable drips into the silence, echoing off pillars carved centuries ago by hands long dust. In those echoes, one hears both faith and futility. A woman grips her rosary with white knuckles, beads polished smooth by generations of prayer. They slip through her fingers with the rhythm of desperation, each bead a plea, each knot a wound. A single tear carves a track down her cheek, steaming as it falls upon the cold stone. She remembers fields golden with wheat, laughter at feasts, the scent of warm bread, things now torn from her. The beads clatter softly as they strike the floor, the sound small but deafening in the hollow nave. Children fidget in the shadows. One clutches a tiny cross cut from tin, its surface scarred by rust and initials etched by some forgotten hand. Another presses a doll to her face, its cloth torn, its stuffing leaking like spilled memory. Their eyes dart to the saints gazing down from the stained glass, their faces frozen in sacrifice. Martyrs gaze with unblinking calm, as though reminding them that faith is not meant to soothe, but to endure. The soldiers bow, their armor dulled, their cloaks wet from snow. One fingers a dagger at his side, tracing its hilt as if it might answer questions that faith cannot. His lips move, though no words escape, the silence of his prayer louder than any chant. He thinks of battles fought, of blood spilled, of comrades buried, and wonders if exile is truly worse than war. The candlelight catches on his blade, and for an instant the dagger gleams like a star, sharp and distant. Outside, the bell rope groans, and the tower answers with a single toll. The sound rolls across the courtyard, heavy, deliberate, like a heartbeat slowed by grief. One toll, then silence. The silence after the bell is profound, a vacuum that swallows their breath, their whispers, their prayers. It is in that silence that doubt slips in, curling like smoke around the rafters. Behind the altar, a tapestry hangs, depicting a harvest. Fat grapes, smiling peasants, sheaves of golden grain. Its colors are faded, moth-eaten, yet it clings stubbornly to the wall. A soldier stares at it, his chest tightening at the sight. It is a memory of abundance stitched into cloth, mocking him with its beauty. His mouth tastes of iron, his stomach hollow with hunger. The tapestry does not weep for him. The priest lifts his hands, fingers trembling, and dips them into the font. The water is icy, biting at his skin. But he does not flinch. He sprinkles it over them, droplets glinting like glass as they fall. They strike, and those who receive it bow lower, foreheads nearly pressed to the stone. Blessing or curse, it is hard to tell the difference now. At the far corner of the nave, a boy lights a candle for his father, lost to the decree. The flame flickers wildly, guttering in the draught. He cups his hand around it, protecting it from the cold breath of the chapel. His lips move with a child's prayer, unformed, unsure. The flame steadies, small but steady, its light catching in his eyes. Hope, fragile and trembling, lives there, though it is bound by sorrow. When the final amen fades into the stone, the congregation does not rise immediately. They remain kneeling, reluctant to abandon even this hollow comfort. At last, one by one, they rise, their limbs stiff, their eyes hollow. They do not speak as they file toward the door. The hinges groan as it opens, spilling dawn's gray light into the nave. The air outside is colder, harsher, but it is honest. They step out into the courtyard, snow crunching beneath boots, frost glittering on cloaks. Their breath clouds in the morning air, their bodies hunched against the wind. Behind them, the chapel door shuts with a heavy thud, muffling the faint glow of candlelight. The sound is both farewell and verdict, as if the holy place itself has turned its face away. Above the door, a raven perches on a stone gargoyle. Its feathers glisten with frost, its eyes black and sharp. It cocks its head, watching them, silent but knowing. Then, with a sudden beat of wings, it takes to the air, vanishing into the pale sky. The legion moves forward, leaving the chapel behind. Their footprints mark the snow, but already the wind begins to erase them. The memory of their prayers fades with the distance, replaced by the creak of carts and the sobs of children. Ahead lies only road and forest, hunger and trial. Yet something lingers. The boy's candle, the woman's rosary, the priest's trembling voice, all remain, carried within them as they walk. They may have left the chapel's walls, but its silence, its doubt, and its fragile flicker of hope march beside them. And as they vanish into the morning mist, the question lingers like a ghost in the cold air. When faith itself feels exiled, what remains to guide the weary through the wilderness? Mist clings low across the marsh, a silver shroud stretched over frozen earth. The air is sharp, every breath burning the lungs, every sound dulled as though swallowed by waterlogged soil. Boots break through thin crusts of ice, splintering with each step, the splash beneath as cold as knives. The marsh exhales the smell of peat and rot, dampness older than memory, as if the ground itself refuses to forget the bodies it has swallowed. A raven circles above, its cry long and thin, a lament carried over the reeds. The legion moves slowly, their line broken and staggering. Cloaks hang heavy, soaked by mist, weighed down by snow and despair. One soldier kneels, his hands sinking into the blackened peat. He feels the cold creep up his arms, into his marrow, as though the earth is pulling him down into its secrets. Beneath his fingers, smooth stones shift, carved once long ago by hands now dust. He traces a rune half buried, the grooves filled with ice, and wonders if the dead here curse him too. He remembers the warmth of banners, the clamor of marketplaces, the laughter of wives at windows. That memory glows only for a heartbeat before the marsh swallows it whole. Children stumble, their cries muffled in the fog. One carries a comb, bone-carved, its teeth broken, its edge chipped by years of use. She runs her thumb across it, remembering how her mother's hands once braided her hair before feast days, weaving ribbons, bright as fire. Now the comb is damp, slick with marsh water, its memory fragile as the frost patterns forming on reeds. Another child clutches a doll that has lost its face to the mire, its cloth streaked with black. They carry these relics like talismans, fragile roots of a world that will never return. The women wade through the water, baskets strapped to their backs, though the grain within is soaked and ruined. Seeds slip through wicker, scattering into the marsh like lost prayers. One stops, staring at her hands, raw and red from cold, and whispers under her breath. It is not a psalm, not a hymn, merely a name, spoken again and again, as though repetition could summon him back. The fog muffles the sound, carries it nowhere, leaving only the taste of grief. Above them the sky is pale, a colorless dome where no sun breaks through. The air presses heavy, thick with silence. Even the reeds seem reluctant to move. Every splash, every breath feels sacrilege, disturbing something ancient that waits just beneath the water's skin. A curlew cries in the distance, mournful, hollow, echoing across the flat expanse. Its voice cuts through the fog like a blade, but it offers no comfort. Only reminder. They come upon a mound, raised high above the marsh, crowned by frost and crowned by stones. A barrow? Older than their exile, older than their empire. Symbols etched into its sides flicker with ice, their meaning long vanished. The centurion halts, his chest heaving, eyes fixed upon the hill. The marsh falls into silence around them, as though it too pauses. He kneels at the base, pressing his forehead to frozen rock, his breath fogging over lichen. He does not speak. The silence is his prayer. Behind him, the legion watches, uncertain. Some lower their heads, some look away. They are weary of faith, yet cannot abandon it. One soldier mutters, "We are cursed." The words vanish quickly, swallowed by fog, but their weight lingers. The others do not rebuke him. They know it too. The women gather close, children pressed against their skirts, eyes wide. The priest, voice cracked by frost, begins a chant. His words stumble, the Latin fractured, each syllable quivering in the cold. Yet he continues, his voice threading through the mist, thin and unsteady, but alive. The sound weaves between reeds, between breaths, between heartbeats. For a moment, the marsh listens. The centurion rises, his hand pressed against the stone. Frost clings to his skin, but his gaze is steady. He lifts the broken emblem of their legion high above his head. Its metal is tarnished, its eagle bent, but it gleams faintly in the dim light. The others bow their heads, whether in reverence or resignation, none can tell. The marsh mirrors them in stillness, the water unbroken, the reeds unmoving, the sky holding its breath. Snow begins to fall again, fine and silent. It settles upon shoulders, upon hair, upon the emblem itself, softening its jagged edges. Each flake is a whisper, each a veil. The barrow beneath them grows whiter, its stones vanishing under frost. The world narrows to breath, to silence, to the slow settling of snow. A child breaks the stillness with a question, her voice small but clear. Will the marsh remember us too? Her words hang in the air, fragile, unanswered. The priest falters, the chant dying in his throat. The mothers bow their heads, eyes stinging. The centurion lowers the emblem, his eyes fixed on the child, but he does not speak. He cannot. The marsh has already answered. They move on, leaving the barrow behind, their footsteps sucking into mud, their breath white in the dim light. The fog closes around them, swallowing their shapes until only the faint ripple of disturbed water remains. The marsh exhales, and silence returns. But in the hush, in the fragile fall of snow, something lingers. Not triumph, not certainty, but endurance. They walk into the frozen mist not as warriors, not as citizens, but as shadows who refuse to vanish. The marsh may remember them, or it may not. But they walk forward, and the sound of their breath becomes the only prayer they have left. The question follows them, whispered in fog, pressed into the earth beneath their feet. When the land itself becomes a graveyard, will the living still carve meaning into its silence?